I haven't even done my hair. Right. Hello, hello. There we go. Host mode is out. I absolutely, positively do not expect anyone to be up at this hour. And I am entirely doing this for my own, what's the term? My own selfish enjoyment. But I just found a transcript of Chris Crawford's speech from 1992. Now, Chris Crawford was one of the original GDC founders. Someone who, if we look at it now, was someone who was a fucking legend before their time. Yeah, it's late night, so I'm allowed to swear. And I first became aware of Chris Crawford from this speech, this lecture, this thing he did for GDC back in the day. And it was pretty fucking rad. And I don't know, like, I've always wanted... Oh, God. Using your phone to stream absolutely does not remove notifications on it. So there we go. So I just found a text log of it. So I got a cup of water. I'm going to try reading this. Because there was a time when I used to do, like Shakespeare and bullshit like that. When was the last time I read something like this? So you know what? I'm going to give it a crack. Like I said, this is just going to be a teeny tiny little micro stream, if you will. So, you lovely, lovely folks, on this at like midnight on a Sunday night, I'm going to do a reading of a thing and see what you think. See if I can summon up some courage and some good ability. I can't even see what that's. Artsy Poe. Late night stream? Cool. Yeah. So again, I found a transcript of Chris Crawford's The Dragon speech from GDC. And as someone who used to learn a lot of scripts and stuff, I don't know, I wanted to try reading this. So, I'm going to give this a go. Without further ado, attune your ears to the grinding gears. Yeah, you might need to turn me up because I'm not going to yell because it's midnight, I'm in the living room. So, Chris Crawford's lecture, The Dragon Speech, given at GDC 1992. Alright, hang on, I should have a slug of water first. Feck. That means I have to move you lot. Sorry. Feck. God, feck. I should put the water closer. Alright, there we go. Hindle's like, I hear no grinding gears. Let me fucking get started. God. Alright. Was it so very long ago, before I knew the dragon? That was in 1975, when I first encountered the concept of a computer game. That was a new concept for me. The computer had always been a tool for scientific calculation, and now the notion of using it to play, well, that was fascinating and utterly unconventional concept for me. And so, I decided to begin acquainting myself with this technology. I had no dream as yet. For me, the dragon still slept, but I wanted to learn. And so I set to work. I started programming mainframe computers. That was the technology eons ago. Fortran, punch cards, JCL, IBM mainframes. But in the life of one man, it's not so very long ago. And in 1976, I got my first computer game running. A strategy game on a hex grid. And at the same time, I decided I was going to get a microcomputer. I wanted to own my own machine. I wanted to understand technology. And so I set to work, teaching myself everything that I could about TTL, about power supplies, ML309K voltage regulators, and 7476JK flip boxes, the difference between a tantalum and an electrolytic capacitor. Oh, that's going to be a hard one for me to learn. Sorry. And in which end, and which end of the soldering iron gets hot. And then, in January of 1977, I got my first computer, a KIM-1, single board microcomputer with a, what is that? With a 6502 processor, 1K of RAM. I was set. And you know, within 1 month, I got that thing hooked up and running. I learned to code in 6502 machine code, and I had written a game and got it working with 1K of RAM. A little strategy game on a hex grid. And then, like all microcomputer hobbyists, I started expanding my systems and expanding my game. Oh, worst time to get a T-burp. Tal, Hindle, everybody. I started expanding my game. And then, in 1978, I bought my first appliance computer, a Commodore PET, with 8K of RAM. Boosh! And in the same year, I sold my very first commercial computer game. And that was 1978, 15 years ago. I mean, in brackets, a lot longer for us all, but that's another story. Been a long time. In 1979, I joined Atari, did a video game computer system, and then went to work on the Atari 800, because this was the premier graphics and sound machine of the industry. The 800 was so far ahead of everything else. It was a machine to learn on. And I knew nothing about graphics and sound, so I hurled myself into the machine, absorbing everything I could, learning all about graphics and sound. Some of you may find it ironic to learn that at the time, I was known as the graphics wizard at Atari. And indeed, there was I lost my place, piss in a wind. And indeed, there was a period of time when my game, Eastern Front, was the most graphically advanced product on the marketplace. I lost my place again. I do apologise, one and all. I do apologise. On the marketplace. Yes. Because that was a phase that I needed to go through. I needed to understand graphics on a deep level. I needed to feel that I had a good grip on it. And so all through this period, from 1975 to 1981, for 6 years, I was apprenticing myself to this technology. I was turning it over in my hands. I was getting a feel for it in my fingertips. And for 6 years, I had no dream at all. All I did was learn. And by 1981, I felt I understood the technology. I felt I knew what this medium was about. But I had no dream. I couldn't see the dragon. But by 1981, I could hear him thrashing about in the forest, and I knew he was out there somewhere. I knew he was big, whatever he was, and I wanted to find him. Then, in one of those fortuitous circumstances that are so perfectly timed that we can only ascribe the occurrence as being the workings of fate, Alan Kay came into my life. Alan had been hired by Atari to form a corporate research group. And the first thing he did when he came to Atari was to ask around and see if there were any angry young Turks who were possibly in danger of leaving the company. And every finger pointed to me. Okay, I'll take your job, Alan. So I went to work in corporate research. And then Alan very carefully set about planning his division and started I lost my place again, I apologise. It's like grey text on white background. I'm doing my best. And started to interview and hire other people. But it was 3 months before he hired anyone else, which means that, for 3 months, I had Alan Kay all to myself. This is the computer scientist's equivalent of being marooned on a desert island with Marilyn Monroe. God, 92 is a different time. Alan and I talked about all sorts of things, and I learned so much from him. You know, some of you might have noticed, over the years, that I can give a fairly generous assessment of my own talents. One of the few things that me and Chris have in common. And it says in brackets, you don't have to laugh that loud. And there is a correspondingly... Oh, feck a duck. I lost my place so badly there. Okay, I'm back. Once again, the Renegade Master, D4 damage, of power to the people. Alan and I talked about all sorts of things, and I learned so much from him. You know, some of you might have noticed, over the years... Oh yeah, sorry. And there's a correspondingly ungenerous assessment of other people's talent. Let me tell you this. Alan Kay is so much smarter than I am. I feel stupid when I'm talking to him. I mean, most other people, when they think, they go in little teeny steps, like A, B, C, D, E, F. No, Alan doesn't work that way. He goes in big leaps, A, J, M, R, Q, and boy, if you want to keep up with Alan when he's talking, you've got to run along behind him, filling in the blanks. B, C, D, E, F, G, and it's hard. You have to work to keep up with this guy, and I used that. No, there's no and. Dyslexia, you put words where they're not. I used to walk out of meetings with him and say, Alan, I can't take it anymore. I have to go back to my office and stare at a wall for a while. And so I learned tremendous amounts from Alan. But you know, the tricky thing is, mostly what I learned from him were the blanks that I filled in. It's impossible to say whether the blanks I filled in were the blanks that he intended for me to fill in, or blanks that just came from my own experience. And perhaps that is the mark of a truly brilliant teacher. But the best lesson I learned from Alan was how to dream well. You know, before I met Alan, I dreamed like most other people. Most people dream in a shoddy fashion, very lazy dreaming. Good dreaming is hard work. It takes energy and talent and experience, but mostly work. One way to understand dreams is to think of them as existing between two extremes, fantasy and planning. Fantasy is free to indulge. Fantasy is the free indulgence of human desire unconstrained by the crass limitations of reality, whereas planning exists entirely in the world of reality, where we plan, where we have narrow objective, where we have already boiled our desires down to specific objectives, and we can create a sequence of steps that will achieve that very objective. And it all lives and breathes the air of reality. Dreaming exists in the netherworld between easy fantasy and plodding planning. Dreaming is an odd mixture, an integration of fantasy and planning. To dream well, we must weave together the warp of fantasy with the wool of reality to create a fabric which is strong. That fabric, if we do it well, is a good dream. A fantasy spreads its wings and soars off into the cosmos, where a plan plods along earthbound. But a dream takes a running leap and jumps as high as it can to catch a handhold by which it can hoist itself up. And that's hard. Because there are lots of people who can fantasize, and there are lots of people who can dot I's across T's. But people who can do both well at the same time, people who can keep their eyes on the stars even as they walk without tripping across a broken ground, such people are very rare, and it takes work. Another way of viewing dreaming is to think of it in terms of an alternate reality. There is, of course, reality, the true reality. But when we fantasize, we create an imagery, a desired universe. But we don't care about whether the universe works, whether it's possible. Only when we dream do we create a universe that is actually possible. A dream universe is a desirable universe that is possible. That means we have to work out the ramifications of our fantasies. We have to figure out the consequences of how everything fits together. Okay, this next bit gets a little bit shaky. I do apologise, as this is verbatim from a speech from 1992. So I do apologise, but I'm reading this word for word. It's a good trick. Really, phone? Really? You're going to do me like that? Oh. So this next bit is wildly sexist. But I'm just going to... this bit is wildly sexist, but I'm just going to read it as is. I don't condone the comment, but, you know, hell, we all read Shakespeare, and Shakespeare comes from a time when women were literally property, so... I'm not even going to get into starting on that one. Anyway. And then, oh sure, I can fantasize about what it would be like to go to bed with Sally Sexbomb. But if I'm going to dream about Sally Sexbomb, well, then I have to think about where we're going to live, and maybe whether we're going to have children, and who's going to do the dishes. That's part of the dream too. So, going on to Alan's goading, I set to work to dream about computer games. You know, most people, when they dream, they draw a sketch of a dragon, but they do it in pencil, and all they do is sketch the barest of outlines of the dragon. Under Alan's goading, I had to fill in every detail. I had to see every scale, every eyelash. I had to know what it was, what was inside the dragon, where its kidneys were, how big the lungs were, what the skeletal structure was. So it took me a year and a half just to hammer together my basic dream. Oh, now I get T-burps. Who puts grey text on a white background? Assholes. So it took me a year and a half just to hammer together my basic dream. As part of this, as an exercise, I wrote a book, The Art of Computer Game Design, and it was really an exercise to help me dream more clearly. And by 1983, I had my dream. I could see the dragon clearly in my mind's eye. Let me tell you about my dream. I dreamed of a day when computer games would be a viable medium of artistic expression, an art form. I dreamed of computer games encompassing the broad range of human experiences and emotion. Computer games about strategy or self-sacrifice, games about duty, honor, patriotism, a satirical game about politics or games about human folly, games about man's relationship to God or nature, games about the passionate love between a boy and a girl. Like I said, 92. It's very, very blinkered view. Games about family, relationships or death, mortality, a boy becoming a man, or a man realizing he's no longer young. Games about a man facing the truth at high noon on a dusty main street, or a boy and his dog, or a prostitute with a heart of gold. All of these things were part of this dream, but by themselves they amounted to nothing, because all of these things had already been done by other art forms. There is no advantage, no purchase, nothing superior about this dream. It's just an old rehash. All we were doing with a computer. Feck. And then there's these phrases that just trip me up, because they're transcribes of written speech, which is usually better for me, but there we go. All we are doing with the computer, if we do, is just reinvent the wheel with poor grade materials. Well, we don't have a dream worth pursuing. But there is the second part of this dream that catapulted it into the stratosphere. The second part is what made this dream important and worthy. What important and worthy? That is interactivity. Let me explain to you why interactivity is so overwhelmingly important. Let me talk about the human brain. You know, our minds are not passive receptacles. They are active agents. It's not as if we have a button on the side of their heads and they come along and push the button and the top of our head flips open and they take a pitcher full of knowledge and just pour it into our skull, like bloop, 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 bloop. And they close the top of our heads and shake it and say, well, congratulations, you're educated now. It doesn't work that way. How does a little boy learn about butterflies? Does he read a big, thick book about butterflies? No. He catches one and he tears his wings off. Ugh, look at the green stuff coming out of his body. I wonder what it tastes like. That's how they learn. Again, I personally don't agree with that, but I'm reading verbatim. And this isn't some gross characteristic of little boys only. The only difference between us and him is that we've learnt to hide that. This is fundamental to our nature. It's wired into our brains, and if you really want to understand that concept, sometimes you ought to watch a couple of little kittens play. Yeah, you knew there were going to be kitties in this, right? I love this bit, so I want to not fuck it up. Here are these two little kittens. What do? Well, one of them sees a bug, so he decides to follow that bug all through the house. And the second kitten, well, he sees the first kitten and he gets an idea. What does he do? Well, he gets down real low and he folds his ears down real flat so that he's harder to see. And he creeps forward all stealthy until he gets close enough. And he gets ready. And then he pounces on the first kitten. And he kickety kicks. And then he goes claws. And then he goes bitey. And the two kittens roll around the floor. And we laugh and we say, oh, the kittens are having fun. The kittens do nothing but play all day long. Kittens don't have a care in the world. And we would be wrong. Because, see, those kittens are not goofing off. They're engaged in some very serious business. To understand the nature of this business, you need merely ask yourself the question, what is the job description of an adult cat? Well, there's the adult cat standing in the house, just keeping an eye on things, when all of a sudden he sees a mouse. What does he do? He gets down low, and he folds his ears down flat so that he'll be harder to see, and he creeps forward stealthily until he gets close enough, and he gets ready, and he pounces on the mouse, and he kicks at it, and he claws at it, and he bites at it. And that's how an adult cat can earn their living. You see, these kittens are not wasting their time in idle entertainment. They're engaging in job training. This is serious business for them. You don't see a bunch of kittens lined up in nice, neat rows with some old geezer of a cat standing on a chalkboard drawing anatomical designs of mice as he approaches with approach angles and attack vectors. They don't do it that way. All the higher mammals learn by playing, by doing, by interacting, and indeed, the higher the mammal, the more of its life is spent in play, preparation for itself in adulthood. So you see, the active role of the mind is fundamental to the way we think, and it's wired into our brains. And over the millennia, we humans have learnt ways to improve this. The first improvement is language. Language is a way to learn from many people. Suppose after this lecture, I go down to the lunchroom and eat an orange hamburger, and it makes me sick. And I come back to you saying, yo, hey, don't eat the orange hamburger. It's going to make you sick. Well, that way, you learn something without ever having to get sick. And that's good. In fact, most of the things that you know, facts in your minds, are things that you learn from other people. So language is a way of allowing one person to learn from many different people. But you know, we've also learned to turn that concept around, to use language as a way of allowing one person to teach many people. This is the concept of mass media. By mass media, I don't just mean radio and television. Mass media goes back hundreds of thousands of years to a circle of people sitting around a fire with one guy telling a story. This lecture, this little teeny tiny stream of madness that I'm doing, this lecture is mass media. Look, right now, I'm teaching 200 people. All right, right now I think I'm chatting to 9 people, but that's cool. But this, like I said, reading of a speech from 1992. So think about how tremendously efficient that is. That's really an enormous improvement in the efficiency of a single conversation. However, we've learned over the years that there is a responsibility. I was eventually going to trip over my words. However, we've learned over years that there is a responsibility associated with this. That is, if I'm going to give you guys this lecture, if I'm going to take up your time, it is incumbent to me to do a good job. I'd better prepare this lecture carefully. I'd better outline it, plan it, rehearse it over and over until I have a lecture that is worthy of all of your time. A side note, I am currently reading you the verbatim log of this speech, so congratulations, congratulations, Chris. I'd say you definitely did something worthwhile, but we're about, yeah, I'm still going, better rehearse it over and over. So there's a real responsibility here. In fact, over the years, we have also learned that if you run with that responsibility, and if you do a really good job, lots and lots of people will want to hear about your communication. So, for example, suppose this lecture was a really fantastic lecture. Suppose I prepared it and had special effects and spaceships shooting across behind me and all sorts of fabulous things going on. This lecture was so great and so wonderful that after it was all over, you ran out of this hall saying, "Hallelujah! Brother Crawford has shown me the light." And everyone wants to buy the Chris Crawford lecture videotapes, and everyone wants to buy Chris Crawford lecture audio tapes, and Chris Crawford lecture t-shirts, and coffee mugs, and keychains. But I'm not that good. I think we'll have to scrap the t-shirts and coffee mugs. But the principle remains the same. In fact, this is the genesis of art. Because art is just a way of communicating ideas. For example, consider Michelangelo's statue. I can't pronounce it. It's Pieta. P-I-E-T-A. Pieta. Feck. Whatever. Michelangelo's statue showing Mother Mary holding the crucified body of her son. This tells you something about the nature of motherly love, and Michelangelo invested so much talent into that statue, so much energy and so much time that the result conveys to you, the audience, the message of motherly love with tremendous power. It is compelling, it is clear, it is powerful, and because of these things, it is so great, we call it beautiful. That is the strength. That is how art comes about. However, we've also learnt over the years that the responsibility works both ways. It's a two-way street. You don't get off scot-free. You have a responsibility too. Your responsibility is not to mess up my beautiful stage. That's very kind of you to say, Tenwin. It's not that I'm tired. I've got that as a backlight. So if I look at me under normal lights, hello. But if you look at me like this, I look like I've not slept in like 80 years. I will fight you, phone. You can see the vein going. And this is why people who do lighting are paid very, very well. Anyway, where was I? You'll know the real reason I'm reading this is because I wanted to listen to the speech of it, but the audio is so crackled and broken that listening to it on headphones is really painful. And then I was like, I haven't read anything in a long time. And before I moved out to the States, I was getting in the habit of practicing reading aloud, which is something I find very difficult to do. Anyway, so it was on the subject of art as a two-way street. Here we go, yeah. So this is a two-way street. You don't get off scot-free. You have a responsibility too. Your responsibility is not to mess up my beautiful stage. I mean, if I went to all the trouble to prepare this damn thing, you better not disrupt it. So don't get up, move around, don't rustle your papers and drop them on the floor, don't stomp your feet, don't crack your knuckles, don't belch, don't fart, don't do nothing. Just sit there, quietly, passively. Wait, didn't I just say, I think it was around here somewhere, didn't I just say something about the human mind being an active agent, not a passive receptacle? What gives? Here we have the march of civilization. Every day, in every way, getting better and better, and the grand culmination of this glorious march is the creation of art, which puts you, the audience, in a passive role, which we have just shown to be fundamentally in conflict with the basic structure of the human mind? What gives? Well, maybe I can illuminate the nature of this contradiction with a little imaginary alternative. Suppose instead of giving this lecture, or reading the speech, suppose I were to take each of you one at a time. Now we'll start with you, David, actually, or Game Crazy. Hello. We'll start with you, David. And you and I will go off to a little room together, and we would have a conversation instead of a lecture. An interactive conversation instead of an expository lecture. God, I'm tripping over my words today. And so, I would start to talk about my dream, and you might ask me a question, and then I'd answer your question, and you might have another question, and I'd answer that. And you'd start to argue with me, and I'd argue back, and we'd go back and forth, and we would interact. And it would be a lot different, wouldn't it? Because you'd be a lot more active. You wouldn't be sitting there on your own fat butt. You'd be doing something. The juices would be flowing, the wheels would be turning, your mind would be going a mile a minute, and you'd learn more, wouldn't you? Yeah. And from my point of view, I would convey my message a lot more efficiently, would I? See, the problem is, there are 200 of you. Well, 11 of you, but you know what I mean. There are 200 of you, and there's only one of me. And if I were to use that method, I'd be at it forever. So the lecture method is a lot more effective than the conversation method. And that is the basic problem we face. The interactive conversation is effective, but the expository. But the lecture is effective. The interactive conversation is effective, but the lecture is efficient. And that's the trade-off we make. Over the centuries, we as humans have learned that the gains of efficiency outweigh the losses of effectiveness. And therefore, we choose these methods. But the sacrifice remains real. We haven't ever solved that problem. It's been with us since the beginning of history. Every single artist has faced this. Every communicator, every teacher, every novelist, every sculptor, every singer, every musician, every painter, every single artist throughout human history has been forced to sacrifice effectiveness for efficiency. Until now. Because now we have technology that changes everything. With the computer, we can take my ideas that I want to communicate, and I can express them in the form of an algorithm, and then I can take that algorithm and I can write it up as program code, and then I can put that program code onto a floppy disk. And we can mass produce that floppy disk. We can make millions of copies of that disk and spread it all over the world so that millions of people can play my game. They can interact with my ideas. Because they are interacting, I achieve effectiveness. And because we are mass producing that disk, I achieve efficiency. This is the revolutionary nature of the computer. It allows us to automate interactivity to achieve both effectiveness and efficiency. It was the most important part of my dream, and so, in 1983, I set about the long task of realizing that dream. Of course, any truly worthy dream cannot be realized in a year or 2 or 5. A truly good dream needs a lifetime to realize. But that didn't stop me from at least identifying the fundamental problem that had to be solved. And the first problem that requires my treatment, the biggest problem we face, is a lack of people in our games. Have you ever noticed that computer games, all of our games, are about things, not people? We shoot things, we chase things. Things shoot us, things chase us. We manipulate things, we maneuver things, we allocate things, we manage things, but it's always things, things, things. There are never any people in our games. Sure, I've seen the pitiful excuses for characters in our games. They're fakes. They are... Oh, I can't pronounce that word. I'm just going to skip chunks I can't pronounce. The characters in our games are like a cardboard box with a picture of a face pasted onto the front and nothing else. There's no heart, there's no soul in them. all they have are a couple of buttons. But you push one of the buttons and he says, I am your friend. And you push the other button and he says, I am your enemy. And the character we have in our games is as much to do with real characters as an inflatable doll has to do with sex. That may be good enough for most people, but that's not good enough for me. Damn it, Chris, why'd you have to make some of this speech really awkward? Note to self, if I ever do this again, I'm cutting all the sex bits out. Oh, sorry, just unfurling. If we want real characters in our games, then the first three fundamental technological hurdles we must jump. First, the technology of human facial expression. We've got to be able to show people's faces. We're going to show people's faces emoting. We're going to show our characters laughing and smiling and crying and looking frightened and skeptical and suspicious and greedy and lustful and romantic. We've got to have a library of 100 facial expressions, each of which can be put onto the face of any member of our cast. You can't do that yet, can you? I can. I have. The second thing we need is artificial personality, the algorithms of human behavior. We need equations to show how people feel, how they behave, how they react to different situations. We need this on a gigantic scale. We have to be able to handle hundreds upon hundreds of different behaviors with thousands of different equations. You can't do that yet, can you? I have. And lastly, we need the language of emotional expression. We need to allow our players to interact with the characters in an emotionally significant fashion. It's not good enough to be able to stab them or shoot them, take something away from them or give them something or just talk to them about where the princess is. That's not good enough. We've got to be able to talk about feelings and emotionally significant events. Okay, yeah, no, it's just, I think that's a typo. Okay. You can't do that yet, can you? Yes, but I have. And I don't say these things to boast. I say them to point out how long we've been working on it and how long the path in front of you is. I've been working on this stuff for 10 years. You've got a lot of catching up to do. My very first interpersonal relationship game, Gossip, was published in 1983. 1983! That's 2 years beforehand. Tenwin says, oh, I assume you don't have... Oh, you're not supposed to be nice to me when I'm being... or reading weird things at midnight. Hang on, I think I can bring up Streamlabs here. So at least I can know. Bear with me a second. Plus it gives me a chance to breathe. Which of you... Oh, Tenwin. You did not have to do that, but thank you kindly. Tenwin donated fucking $20 at 1 in the morning, saying, I have no idea what you're talking about. I can't hear you, but you deserve $20. Am I not coming through? Can you lot hear me? Well, Tal's saying it's a bit quiet. Okay. And where's me? There we go. And that's what I'm reading at the moment. So if you want to go back and do it. And it's from this. But the audio is crackled and broken, which is why I'm reading it instead of listening to it. But anyway, Tenwin, thank you kindly. And allow me to continue. Okay. Because we were just about to talk about Gossip. Now, I've not actually, me personally, I've not actually played Gossip. I've been meaning to because it gets referenced in this a lot. And it was made 2 years before I existed. My entire human life has come after this game was created. But let's continue. So, tiny burps because I ate a lot earlier. Okay. So, my very first interpersonal relationships game, Gossip, was published in 1983. It had human facial expressions, artificial personality, and the language of emotional expression. It was primitive, but you know, the industry still haven't published anything as good as Gossip, and that's pretty sad. Well, I continued to advance my work on it. Oh, let me unfurl a little bit. In a very opportunistic basis, trying different approaches, the successes and failures. It was very herky-jerky development path that I followed. Oh, no. It was a very herky-jerky path that I followed. And in 1987, I published a game called Trust and Betrayal, Legacy of Cyboot. And one of the things, and Legacy of Cyboot, and that one was a commercial failure. At the time, I blamed my own failings. Well, you know, I'm still learning this stuff. This was out on a limb. I thought that the failure was all mine. And what I didn't understand was what I was really up against, some fundamental forces at work in the industry. Forces that I didn't understand at all. But in 1990, something else happened that served as a kick in the side of the head and woke me up. And that was the reactions to my game Balance of the Planet. When I set up to do Balance the Planet, I wanted to do a game about environmental policy. This is in 1990, everybody. But I wanted to do a game that had some honesty in it, some integrity. I didn't want to do dolphins dancing across the screen. I didn't want to do Zork dressed up as in Greenpeace clothing. I wanted a game that honestly addressed environmental policy issues, and that was a pretty tough problem. But I was proud of the approach that I came up with. The solution I came up with was a pretty good one. It really did address those issues. In fact, Balance the Planet remains the best way to learn about environmental policy trade-offs. It's better than any book or television show or videotape. If you really want to understand it, that is the best way. So, boy, was I proud of that product. And so, I was really stunned when the industry rejected it. Pretty widely. Distributors, retailers, customers, press, game designers too, pretty much rejected this game. They turned thumbs down, no good. I think the overall reaction of the industry was best summarized by a review of the game written by some fellow in Computer Gaming World. Let me just read it to you. He said, regarding Balance the Planet, "It is the closest thing to art to be sold as computer entertainment, but it's just not fun. And therefore, if the game is not fun, it simply wouldn't be right to endorse it." A more explicit rejection of my dream cannot be imagined. Here they are saying, yes, it is art, but it is not fun, and therefore, whamp whamp. I can imagine our reviewer rejecting Macbeth. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Shakespeare. Your play, Macbeth, boy, did keep me up with nightmares for 3 nights, but gosh, Will, it's just not fun. I mean, can't you add some belly laughs in there? Maybe we can have Macbeth tell a few mother-in-law jokes to his wife. And you, Mr. Beethoven, your Ninth Symphony, oh, makes my heart soar in the awe and majesty of the cosmos. But you know, it's just not fun. I mean, we need something we can dance to. We need a catchy little tune. Catchy little tunes we can snap our fingers to." So what could I do? At first, I fought it. I just couldn't believe it. I was furious. I fought back. But then I realized that this is not really attributed to obtuseness of individuals. No, this was a fundamental force. This was the marketplace at work. Let me explain to you what I think was going on, that is still going on in our industry. Think in terms of scale of difficulty, with simple games at the bottom and hard games at the top. But the scale applies to people as well, with inexperienced people at the bottom and very, very expert players at the top. Now, any given game falls somewhere on this scale, but if it doesn't fall on a single point, it is actually a window. There is a lower difficulty and there is an upper level of difficulty, and when you first start playing the game, you normally start off below the lower level. And what happens? You get skunked. The game clobbers you. But no problem. You come back, you try again, you learn, you get better. So you start climbing that ladder, and as you climb that ladder, pretty soon you climb above the lower level of difficulty, and then you climb into the fun zone, where the game is challenging and interesting and fun, but you keep playing. And so you keep learning, you keep climbing the ladder, and as you do, the day comes when you climb over the upper level. Now the game is too easy to beat, it's boring, you don't play anymore, you put it aside, but then what do? You buy another game. But this game is going to be a little more difficult than the previous one. It's going to be higher up the scale, so you've got to climb through that game, put aside, buy another game, and another, and you're just going to climb right up the ladder, improving your expertise. And the result is something that I call game literacy. Note, this might be one of the first examples that I personally have found to an individual referencing game literacy in a GDC speech, and this is, again, 92, so don't take that as gospel, but the result is something I call game literacy, and it really depends on the genre. For example, I'm really literate when it comes to flight simulators. I played a lot of them, and so when I got Secret Weapons of the Luftwaffe, I took that thing, I plugged it in, I fired it up, and within 5 minutes I was shooting down P-51s. But when it comes to graphical adventures, every year or two, I get the latest graphical adventure. I plug it in, fire it up, and within 5 minutes, I'm bashing my head against a brick wall, stumped and frustrated. I mean, I'm so bad at this. I had to call up Brian Moriarty and get hints from him for Loom. But we all have different literacies. If you think about the population of people out there, it's divided into 3 groups. At the very bottom scale, there are millions of people. At the bottom of the scale, there are millions of personal computer owners who are not literate. They do not play games very often, and so they are way down the bottom. And there is a very small group of people climbing the ladder at any given time. And at the top of the ladder, there are the aficionados, the experts, the people who play games a lot. Now, there are a few 100,000 of these people. Now, simple question. If you're a developer, or a publisher, or a distributor, or a retailer, or any of these groups, who do you want to sell to? The only possible answer is group number 3, the aficionados. Why? Because they are easy to sell to. They're connected. They all read the magazines. They're on all the electronic networks. God, I love this. They're all a big circle of friends. They're always talking about the latest and greatest games. They hang out in stores all the time. They spend money. These people buy games a lot, so they're easy to sell to. The best proof of how easy it is, look at the success of Wolfenstein 3D. Here's a game with 0 formal marketing, and everyone's talking about it. How did they find out about it? The network, the connections. Everybody here in this room knows Wolfenstein 3D. That's just proof of how powerful this group really is. But by contrast, how do you sell to the bottom end of the scale? How can you even tell them that your game exists? I mean, advertise in the nightly news? I mean, these people don't read any of the regular magazines. They don't log on to CompuServe every 35 minutes. These people, the way they buy games is they walk into a computer store once a year to get a new ribbon for their dot matrix printer. They get lost in the store and they bumble across the game section and they look and say, "Oh gosh, computer games? That's right. I haven't played any of these in 2 years. Maybe I'll buy one. Oh, see, look, here's a pretty box. Harpoon, I think I'll buy it." I don't know where this voice is going. I'm genuinely sorry. I bet it's got whales. How do you sell? How do you sell to these people? And these people here, the aficionados, these are the ones to sell to because they'll tell you what they want. By designing for the bottom crowd, it's hit or miss. You spend $500,000 on a game, back when AAA was $500,000 production. You spend $500,000 on a game, put it out there, and they don't like it, but they won't tell you that they don't like it. They just won't buy it. But these people, oh boy, try and stop them from telling you what they don't like. They'll send you letters, they'll fill out feedback forms, send you emails. They will call you up in the middle of the night to tell you what is wrong with your game and how to make it better. These people, it's easy to figure out what they want. And what do they want? They want more depth. They've invested a lot of money and a lot of time climbing that ladder, and they do not want to throw away that investment. They don't want to start climbing all over a new ladder. They want to keep climbing that ladder. They want to go higher and higher because they want more depth in their games. And I think about how that compares to my dream. Because what I want is to encompass a broad range of human experiences and emotions. What I want is breadth. What the customers want is depth. And I'm at cross purpose with my audience. And there is only one conclusion I can draw. I have to leave. I don't fit in here anymore. Now, if I was time traveling, I would travel back into time. I would have given him a massive hug and been like, Chris, mate, you don't know how much you're needed. But that's a different story. Also, knock off the sexist jokes. Now, I realise that's kind of strange, but you know, many years ago, I left the crowded cities of the eastern seaboard, and I crossed the mountains, and I came upon the virgin forests of Kentucky. Of course, that's the one I trip over. And there I built myself a cabin, and I hunted the dragon. It wasn't very good by then. I only bumped into him at night, and by chance. My encounters with him were brief and desperate. I'd wave my sword frantically, and I'd hear claws hissing through the air, and then he'd be gone. But I was learning, and that was fun. And then more people came, hardy pioneers, and they built cabins near mine, and pretty soon we had lots of cabins, and pretty soon we had a village here, lots of houses, and more people came, until now we had a town with stores and people being busy buying, a town with stores and people being busy in streets and property and lines and lawyers. This place has gotten too damn civilized for me. I mean, I just don't fit in. So I hoist my backpack onto my shoulders. I walk down this main street one last time. I wave goodbye to a few old friends, but most of the faces I see belong to strangers. They look at me and they turn to their neighbours and say, "Who is that scruffy old tramp anyway? Glad he's leaving town. We don't need his kind in this town." And at the edge of town I turn and look back one last time. It's a good town. I'm proud of the role I played in its creation, but out there, to the west, beyond the Mississippi, beyond the Great Plains, await the Rocky Mountains. There are no people there, just rocks and trees, the clear blue sky, and the dragon. He's waiting. He's waiting for me. I can hear you saying, "Chris, this is crazy. I mean, you don't want to leave all this behind. You've got too much invested in here. This is insanity." But you know, you're right. This is crazy. But let me tell you about another crazy old fool. Let me tell you about a guy by the name of Don Quixote. You know, insanity insanity is an inability to come to terms with reality. Don Quixote was definitely insane because he couldn't come to terms. But there was a reason. The reason in which the reality in which Don Quixote lived was a sordid and ugly reality. The people were scrabbling for survival. And Don Quixote didn't want that. He wanted to live in a world where there was truth and human dignity and, yes, love. And try as he might, he couldn't accommodate that into the real world. Other people were able to compromise enough to reach an accommodation. But Don Quixote, for him, the gap was too great and he couldn't bridge that. So instead of giving up on it, he imposed his reality onto the real world. Where other people saw a filthy country hostel, he saw a castle. Where other people saw a flock of sheep, he saw a mighty army. And where other people saw a windmill, he saw a dragon. Yes, Don Quixote was a crazy old fool, but you know, he was more honest about his dream than most people, and for that I honour him. And the time has come for me to make that commitment. I have committed myself, I have dedicated myself to the pursuit of the dragon, and having made that commitment, having decided that once and for all, now, all of a sudden, I can see him, and there he is, right in front of me, it's clear as day. I never thought I would see you this clearly. I always saw you in brief glimpses in the dark, but now you're so much bigger than I ever imagined. And I'm not sure I like this. I mean, yes, you're glorious and beautiful, but you're ugly too. Your breath reeks of death. No, I never had any childish fantasy either about conquering you. But that thinking is for children. You are beyond that. Indeed, I can see, stretched out from your feet, the bodies of my predecessors. All of you, all you have to show for it, as a few nicks and scratches. But do you have to laugh at me in that way? Am I so pitiful that you sneer in my face like that? Yes, you frighten me. You hurt me. I felt your claws ripping through my soul. But I'm going to die someday. And before I do that, I've got to face you eyeball to eyeball. I've got to look you right in the eye and see what's inside. But I'm not good enough to do that yet. I'm not experienced enough. So I'm going to have to start learning. Today, here, now. Come, dragon. I will fight you. Sancho Panza, my sword. For truth, for beauty, for art. Charge! And then, this is the point in the speech where Chris has literally drawn a fucking sword. At GDC, this motherfucker has a real sword, points it towards the crowd and charges at them. And between the gap in the chairs, he just charges out. And the crowd applauds. Like, the passion and the inspiration that he just spits forth at the end of this speech is stuff of legend. Like, I hope one day to be able to inspire people in the same way it's inspired me. But you know what? He doesn't come back. He charges out of the room. Done. For what I understand, that was his last GDC, at least as a GDC member. I don't know if he's done speeches since then. I should really look into it more, but yeah. Oh. God, can you imagine in this day and age smuggling a sword into GDC? Attendants would stamp you to the ground by the time you got out. But my point is, he didn't come back for applause. He didn't come back so that people could herald how smart and how clever he was. He delivered that whole speech, and then he was just done. And sure, things have changed since he put this forward. And sure, the world has moved on a whole lot, but Tal says, I've got to go to a wedding. See you guys tomorrow. Peace out, Tal. And don't worry, this wasn't some, like, late night breakdown, cry for help kind of stream. This was, I don't know, I think about this speech a lot, and I didn't want to listen to the broadcast audio version, and I started reading it. And then I realised that I'd quite like to read it out loud. So that's a thing that I just did. So yeah. Night Valen saying, you had a whole chicken today. There is no way you would break down. Oh, this fucking light's making it look like I've got these massive stress veins in my forehead. Yeah, I did consume a massive chicken, which is why I'm full of energy. I'm going to put my head down a little bit. Oh, yeah, this is my little setup. The sofa upon which I throw down. And Grey Paint saying, that's good to hear, because I'm too sick for that. Oh, Grey Paint, I'm sorry you're feeling out, yo. I kind of
I kind of licked my cold. Ugh, that's a horrible turn of phrase, I'm sorry. I beat my cold today, so I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, of course, feckin' Meebot didn't pick it up. Why is Meebot such a piece of shit? These are the questions. Tenwin says, tries to send all of the healing bongo kitties to you. Hey, I'm feeling loads better, Tenwin, but thank you kindly. I won't turn down any healing cats. They have a strong power amongst them. So, yeah. I've still got a couple more emails to finish before the end of tonight. For those of you that are sneaky peeking around, I'm still waiting to hear back from them, but I might have scored an actual proper exclusive. So that would be feckin' cool, you know what I mean? I don't want to say the name of the game because I don't want to spoil it, but yeah, I've been chatting with them on and off this week, and they might be giving us like first gameplay, which blows my tiny mind. And they might not, if their PR person can get them feckin' exclusive with like a cool games mag or something, then yo. So yeah. Yeah, I don't really have a lot to add. Like, this was just a little... This was something I wanted to do for myself this evening. So for those of you that came out, like, I really appreciate it. This was entirely self-indulgent and selfish. There was a time when I used to learn scripts like all the time, and it's probably been like a decade at least. Compliment Cap saying, have some good sleeps, Will. Dream of dragons. But dream right. Because a good dream takes hard work. Oh, Dashcool, Dashcool saying, I rather enjoyed that as well. Thank you for sharing. Well, you're entirely welcome. And as I said, I don't plan on, subjecting you to my little late night oddities, but compliments like, it's not selfish, it was interesting. Yeah, I think I already posted it, but let me post it one more time. There's a couple of typos in it, but it's pretty cool. It is pretty cool. And if you can stomach the audio from the video, it's the way Chris delivers it is so good. Like, I hope to be able to be that good of a public speaker, you know what I mean? The Otsupo says, I didn't know what to expect when Twitch blurped, but it wasn't that, and I'm glad it was. Yeah. I mean, I can understand that I worry people sometimes, but, sure, there's a few things that I'd love to solve much better, but I'm not going hungry, I'm not sleeping rough. I have you lot. I've got a wonderful group of varied people all working real hard to keep me upright, and I don't take any of that for granted. Oh, also, it's not complete because I'm still waiting to find out about the thing with the thing for Saturday, but the events page is done, so... that's one of the other things. So I'll throw that in Discord. If you lot got any questions or anything, throw them at me now, because I'll probably drop off in a second and then go back to just finishing up the last of the emails and all that nonsense. You know what I mean? Look, this is the difference between me swapping tabs. Speech. No speech. Wax on. Wax off. Who knows, maybe I'll get lucky. Maybe feckin' Berserk will update in something that's not the fecking... Yeah, sorry. You don't need to hear well-flavoured rants about Berserk. Tenwin saying, new Bongo Cat set. Oh, brilliant. Then I will tear into those. Oh, of course, the Bongo Cat Wii theme, because it's amazing. Oh, Grey Paint's asking, hey, well, what lighting setup do you normally have? Normally we have a... so we've got a custom-made LED ring light, which is made out of a pizza box, and Echo helped us build it. We cut a ring out of cardboard from the pizzas we ate during the E3 Bowl and turned it into a ring light. And then Ket's got some honest-to-goodness baking sheets that we've pinned over them to make a diffuser, so that it doesn't blind us, because that's really feckin' bright, and it's not even directly pointed at me. But honestly, I love LED setups. In the past, I've done stuff with proper lighting rigs, and they look good, but they look very good, but they heat up a room like a Mother Hubbard. Okie dokie. What was I? I'm flitting between there. Any other questions before I bounce? I don't know how to spell bounce. Alright, alright. Well, the good news is that Saturday might be a smoking hot exclusive. The bad news is Saturday will probably not be a multiplayer game. I can't say any more than that right now, and if I get the thing with the thing, it's going to be amazing. But yeah, more on that later. Grey Paint saying, anyway, I guess I'm going to go watch how, I don't know, lighting gels are made. Oh, Hollow Knight when? It's a good point, Tenwin. Have you found much of the story content yet? Because we can tear into that pretty much, like, this week, next week. Well, actually, probably not this week, because I've got a full schedule, but I can, yeah. We'll do it as a next week thing. Yeah. Done. Next week, Hollow Knight. We're going back. Eat, you lovely, lovely folks. Again. Oh, Javier saying, sorry, I missed the... Javier fed. TLDR, I wanted to rewatch... Chris Crawford's lecture, The Dragon Speech, from GDC back in 1992, but I couldn't stomach the audio tonight. The crackling in these headphones was just... ugh. So instead, what I did was I found a transcript of it, and I read the entirety of Chris Crawford's... I read the transcript of Chris Crawford's lecture because I wanted to. And Tenwin says, will you post this on YouTube so I can hear you later? of course. If that is a thing you would like, I am totally down. Like, I need to listen back to hear the bits that I fecked up and the bits that I didn't do well, so I can get better at doing these kind of like, you know, spontaneous script readings and things like that. For no other reason than I want to. I'm a big proponent of the idea that, you know, being able to tell a good story is a skill. It's something that you train at. This is my equivalent of sit-ups, you know what I'm saying? This is uncomfortable and I don't like doing it, and it's very hard for me to do. So, yeah. Tenwin says, last question. How did you get that magnificent beard? Hard work and hard drinking, my friend. Hard work and hard drinking. There's probably some like science that like staying up and drinking causes beard growth or something. Okay, again, thank you all for indulging me, and another huge thank you to Tenwin for sneaking in a donation, almost sneaking it past me there. Like, thank you. And yeah, this is a speech that I personally, at least the core message of it, that I believe in wholeheartedly. So, you know, feck, you're all used to me fecking going on about the artistic medium of games and what they mean. And that whole speech about kittens learning how to kill things by playing, learning how to be kittens learning how to be cats through play. The idea of children learning how to be people through play, I think, is really important. So, yeah. Alright, you lovely, lovely lot. Otherwise, you know I will waffle on till the break of dawn. Thank you so much for indulging me. This was a lovely little thing, and yeah, I am doing good. You do not need to worry. This is not a cry for help stream or anything like that. But look at this grin. This is a real grin. So, thank you. Okay, I'll see you all. I don't know. I mean, Stooge said more IRL streams are good, so maybe I'll try doing one in the field tomorrow on this POS data plan. Or I'll see you all on Tuesday. If you haven't seen it, the events list is up. And, Tenwin, you're going to love this. Tuesday, we're going to get fired into Shadow of War. Because we did Shadow of Mordor, and now we're going to do the sequel, which was, for some, was properly wrecked by... Oh, Soma pills. You're showing up. I'm just hecking out. But yeah, Soma, we need to hang out more. That's a thing that needs to happen. So yes, but to be continued, because I'm definitely going to go crash now. All right. I love you all. Again, thank you so much for indulging me. And yeah, I'll see you Tuesday. We'll tear apart Shadow of War. It'll be fucking great. Alright, I love you lot. I'll see you later. Yes,